recognize that clip you just saw? The summit may be totally unfamiliar, but if you haven't guessed, there was a television show in the late 80s, early 90s called Win, Lose, or Draw. And as you also may have guessed, our pastor was a big fan of that show. In fact, he told me at that time in his life, he watched that show more than he went to church. Here's the game. We're going to have a 60-second clock. We're going to show you, I'm going to give you
He's going to show me a card.
I'm going to show him a card.
And I've got to draw whatever is on that card. And I've got 60 seconds for you guys to guess 6 things. And if we get through it, I win the grand prize. An all-expense paid trip to the finest hotel in Birmingham.
All right, ready?
I don't know if they know how to play yet.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so can we do the first as just a test? So this is one of those games, you know how there are some games if you say the wrong answer, it's minus? This is not that game. Blurt out whatever it is that you think that it is that you're seeing drawn. So show me the first thing. Okay? So I'm going to draw the first thing right here. And as soon as you think you know what this is, go ahead and put your name where you are. Hey! Ding, 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 ding. You got it. Okay, so number 1. So
that was a phone.
That was a phone. So Johnny's going to get a phone. Okay, so we're not professionals at this game. We're just trying. So we got a 60-second clock. It's going to start right now. Oh, no.
Any guesses? Door. Okay. This should be easy.
Money.
Money it is.
Pass.
Pass.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to take that one.
I'm going to do that one.
Let's get these shows now.
Rocks. Grapes.
Not today, but future. What was it? It was future.
Future. No, that's not it. I was trying to change. What are you showing me? That's not future. It's a change. We're done.
You can't draw that one?
Okay, Tom says I need to draw one more.
These are sermon illustrations, so he needs them.
Okay. So if I draw this, anybody got a guess?
Yeah, match it.
Ding, ding, ding.
Ding, ding, ding.
I should have gone to match first. Wow, how do you draw the future? I'll think about that as I go up here.
Lesson learned.
So, the moral of this story is maybe you're not as good at those game shows as you thought you would be when you were watching them. I don't do that. Here. So the next time you're watching Jeopardy and your favorite category comes up, remember if you're ever on the show, they might not have the Bible as one of your categories. Or maybe I'm the one who does good on the Bible category. I also do well on sports. But beyond the games and beyond the fun, there is a reason that I wrote these down. And this week's message is not win, lose, or draw. But this week's message is called God Says He Will. And here is kind of the dark side of God Says He Will, is when we're dealing with what we're afraid that God says He will, we have to deal, before we get to the area of faith, we have to deal with fear. And the things that I drew up here on this board are all things that we fear. And maybe you're thinking, well, I'm not afraid of a phone, and I'm not afraid of a piece of paper, and I'm not afraid of money, and I'm not afraid of a match. But I know I sit in a room full of people who are afraid of a phone call. Not any phone call. But you know those phone calls when your children are young drivers? You know those phone calls when your parents are older and you don't want to hear the phone call at 3 a.m.? You know those phone calls? Anybody ever been afraid of a phone call? Or a piece of paper? Who's ever afraid of a piece of paper, right? It's just a piece of paper. Oh, you guys are all afraid of a piece of paper? Is it a math test?
Report card.
The report card. I can understand that. I was your age once too. A report card when I was your age was a very fearful piece of paper sometimes. Another one, maybe some of you have gotten a piece of paper that says your job is no longer going to exist in so many days or so many months. I know there are some stores that have just shut down recently, and there are people there that are going to be losing their jobs. And that's always a fearful time. Maybe you've been to the doctor and you have some tests done, and then they say that you've got to come in and they need to give you the results, and when you walk in, they hand you a piece of paper and it says something that you never wanted to see. Maybe it was you, maybe it was a family member, but maybe it says cancer. You know, that piece of paper can be the most fearful thing. And money, none of us are afraid of money. We want more of it, right? All of us would want more money, but suddenly if we put that match near our money, it kind of gets a little scary. Anyone ever feel like they're burning through money quicker than they can make it? And you know, eventually it's going to run out. I think at one point in our life or another, we've all been there. And this change that I've done really bad at drawing, see, I don't think we're afraid of this kind of change, the kind that's in our pocket. You know, the old jingle in our jeans. We're not afraid of that change. But we're afraid of a different kind of change, aren't we? Changes that we didn't necessarily dictate. Maybe changes with family. Maybe it's somebody who moves in who you didn't expect to move in. Maybe it's a family member that you had to help more than you really wanted to. Maybe it's whatever change. Maybe it's a new pastor who came to your church and who doesn't do everything exactly like you wanted it done. Maybe. But we're all afraid of change in some way or another. And there's this fear that things will be different and we won't be able to control it. And it's a natural human fear. But over and over again, we hear Jesus say, don't be afraid. We hear angels show up, and what's the first thing that they say as soon as the angel shows up in the Bible? Almost always, without fail, the first thing the angel says is, don't be afraid. And that's the hard thing with the Bible, and we're going to discuss more about that this next week. But how can someone tell me how to feel? How can you tell me how to feel? Somebody says, don't be mad, but I'm feeling angry. I can't control how I feel, can I? Isn't that something beyond what humanity, what is available with humans? And we're not the first people to struggle with this, how to feel, how to control what we feel, how to get to grips with that. And as I think about that, I think of this story, a couple of quotes I wanted to put up. Fear, let's read this out loud. Fear is paying interest on a debt you may never owe. Fear is paying interest on a debt you may never owe. I know some here have been a banker in the past, and can you imagine somebody showing up at the bank and saying, I want to pay this interest payment on this debt that I haven't taken out yet? Says nobody. Nobody ever does that. But that's what fear is. That's what we do when we worry and we're afraid. We fear the phone call. We fear the piece of paper. We fear the loss of money. We fear all these things that, I'll use a quote from one of my favorite artists, the late great Tom Petty. He said, most things I worry about never happen. Most things I worry about never happen. anyway. Anybody ever been there? Yeah. A lot of the times you worry about the phone call because your teenage driver is there, and luckily it never comes, sadly for some of us. But worrying about it won't change a thing. And trusting in God's promises causes us to have to give anyway, even though we're afraid our money may run out. To trust anyway and send our kids out to be able to grow up and become adults on their own. To work as hard as you can at the job that you have, even though it may not last forever. To be able to embrace change, because the only thing that never changes is change itself. If you're in this life, if you're on this planet, things change. They always do. We can't control whether they will, but we got to learn to deal with and make the most of whatever changes do come. But as I think about change, I want to turn to the Bible, and this is going to be a very familiar passage to a lot of you. We're going to go to the Gospel of Luke in the 8th chapter, and we're going to read a couple of verses out loud. Now, I want to give you a little bit of backstory. Jesus was with his disciples at this point, and they were going to cross over in a boat over this place called the Sea of Galilee. Now, when you think of the Sea of Galilee, don't think the ocean. Think more like Lake Erie. It's not that big. It's not a vast ocean that needs to be crossed. And when you think of the boat, don't think of a big barge vessel. Think of probably a 25, 30-foot kind of rowboat. Mel, you've been in one that was like that. About how big are those boats?
I would say no more than 25, 30 feet.
No more than 25, 30 feet. And in some big waves. Mel, what happens to those kind of boats?
I get seasick.
You get seasick. And when it starts to rain out there, what do?
I went to the front of the boat and acted like I was sleeping.
So some of you are going to find out why he did that in this story. Okay, so let's read this out loud. One day, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake." So they got into the boat and started out. As they sailed across, Jesus settled down for a nap. But soon, a fierce storm came down on the lake, and the boat was filling with water, and they were in real danger. Some of the translations translate this fierce storm as gale-force winds and rain. So when you think of gale force, I know we had gale force winds out on Lake Erie last week sometime, and they said the waves were around 12 feet tall. 12-foot waves in a 25-foot boat. There's no helicopter crew to come and rescue you if it capsizes. Life vests have not yet been invented. If that boat turns over and there's 12-foot waves, yeah, they were in real danger. And when we look at these things here, there have been times in our lives when we or someone we love have all been in very real and present danger with all of these things. And I've been there. I've been on the wrong end of those phone calls. I've seen the piece of paper that I was afraid of. There's been plenty of change I didn't want to make, that I didn't choose. There have been times, it seems like all the time, that the money runs out before the month does, right? Been there. And I'd like to tell you that I just kind of breezed through it and didn't have a care in the world because I'm this faithful pastor who never doubts God or never trips over anything. It's not true. It's not true. When you've been at the bedside of someone you love and you're wondering why this had to happen, why is it that the doctors are saying that they're not going to make it? And you're praying, you're like, God will show up. God, you always show up for me. God, why are you not showing up right now? And you're fighting because you're in real danger. This person that you love is going to be gone. It's real danger. And maybe you're like me. Sometimes I just feel like, Jesus, are you taking a nap? Where are you, Jesus? Aren't you going to show up? Aren't you going to show up in my finances? Aren't you going to show up? Are you going to show up? Why are you taking a nap? Jesus, has anyone ever felt like when they needed God most? Where are you, Jesus? Are you taking a nap? I went to the doctor, Jesus, and they said they can't help me. Help me, Jesus. And you're trying to figure out a way that how can you help him wake up so that God can help you, because he's the only one who can help you now. And as I think about that story, that boat, it was full of disciples. And rather than focus on every disciple that was in that boat and what they might have been thinking, I want to talk about a guy, you may have heard of him. His name is Peter. And there's a reason that I talk about Peter. And this is if this were a movie that we were watching about Jesus in the boat, this would be when the producer of the movie would go do one of those flashbacks to a day when Peter was younger. Have you ever seen that in a movie? You're watching a movie and suddenly they peel back, so they kind of help you know why the person's thinking what they're thinking, why they're doing what they're doing, why they're at the point that they're at right now. So we're going to peel back. This is in the same gospel, the Gospel of Luke. And this would have been the story of the day that Peter met Jesus. So let's read that together and kind of get an idea of where we're at in this story. Let's read together. One day, as Jesus was preaching on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, great crowds pressed in on him to listen to the word of God. And he noticed 2 empty boats at the water's edge, for the fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. Stepping into one of the boats, Jesus asked Simon, its owner, to push it out into the water. So he sat in the boat and taught the crowds from there. Okay, so Jesus is at the same sea, the Sea of Galilee. And he gives this look to this guy who's random on the seashore. And there's 2 boats here, but he gives him. You ever given anybody that look? Like, you know that look? Men do it when you were your age and you want to ride your friend's bike, right? You give them that look. Is it okay if I ride your bike? Or you need to go to the store, but your friend's car is parked behind you and you're at the cookout or whatever, and you kind of motion to your friend to throw you the keys because you're just going to take their car to go to the store, right? You're just going to borrow it. Anybody ever done that? It's kind of a normal human thing to do, right? So Jesus looked at Simon, its owner, and then not only did he get into Simon's boat, but then he said to Simon, hey, push me out a little further. I need to get further away from these crowds. Maybe it was because the sound amplifies better from off of the water so we can preach to more people, so more people can hear the word of God. Maybe it's so that he won't feel so claustrophobic with all these people who are around him. Maybe it's just simply because he doesn't want to be up to his neck in water trying to keep away from the crowds, so he's trying to get further away. But either way, he needed a boat. And there were 2 boats there. But Jesus chose the boat of this guy named Simon. And maybe you're like, who is this Simon guy? What does this have to do? Later on, Simon is going to become Jesus' disciple. And the word Simon in Hebrew means shifty. But Jesus changed Simon's name to a different word. Peter, which means rock. Rock is a cool name. Would you like the name Rock? Yeah, that'd be a great name, Rock. Be on the football team, have everybody call you Rock. But you see, Simon had his whole life changed that day by allowing Jesus to come into his boat. And my question here for each of us in this room is, Jesus in your boat? Is Jesus in your boat? And so, Jesus, when he finished, he was preaching for a long time, and he gave this message of the Word, and I would have loved to have been there to hear everything that was written. The writer of the gospel doesn't say everything that Jesus preached in that sermon, but obviously it was life-changing, and there were crowds there just to hear him. But let's read on in this 5th chapter of the Gospel of Luke. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Now go out to where it is deeper, and let down your nets to catch some fish." "Master," Simon replied, "we worked hard all last night and didn't catch a thing. But if you say so, I'll let the nets down again." Some of the versions of the Bible says, when it says we worked hard all night, it says we worked hard to the point of exhaustion. They'd given everything they had all night. They were there. It was early in the morning. They'd fished all night long. They weren't planning on coming to hear a preacher. They weren't there to hear Jesus preach. They were there for something entirely different. They were there doing their job. They were there washing some nets. They were there prepping to go home to see their families. They were there. They were smelly. They were tired. They were weary. And suddenly Jesus shows up and says, "I need your boat." And then he's talking about, "I want you to go back to work again." Anybody ever have Jesus seem like he's calling you to do more than you really can bear? But nevertheless, he'll do whatever he says. And let's read on. "And this time, their nets were so full of fish, they began to tear. A shout for help brought their partners in the other boat, and soon both boats were filled with fish and on the verge of sinking. When Simon Peter realized what had happened, he fell to his knees before Jesus and said, 'O Lord, please leave me. I'm too much of a sinner to be around you.'" Simon realized the peaceful presence of someone greater than he deserves to be around. Seeing the depth of his own sin, knowing that in his heart, Jesus is this great prophet, this great rabbi. And you know, there's some schools in Hebrew culture. They all grow up and they're learning different things at different times. And at some point, because Peter is a fisherman, you know that at some point in his teenage years, he dropped out of the Hebrew school. The reason he dropped out is there was no rabbi that was willing to take him on as their student. Because if they did, he would be a priest or a Pharisee by now and would not be a fisherman. But because he couldn't make it in the academic world and was rejected, he had to go into the social world, and his probably came from a family of fishermen, and it was probably his entire life savings wrapped up into purchasing this boat that he finally had. And he finally had a way to take care of his family. He finally had a way that he didn't have to fear for whether they were going to make it or not. And here's Peter in that moment, and he meets Jesus, and he's like, "I don't even know why you're messing around with me. I wasn't good enough for rabbis and teachers who were way below you. Why are you even here talking to me? Why are you dealing with me? I'm not worthy." You see, Jesus was quick to rebuke the self-righteous. Quick to rebuke the self-righteous. Rebuke means it's kind of a harsh way to tell someone they're wrong. He was quick to rebuke the self-righteous, but empowered repentant sinners to be his disciples. He was quick to rebuke the self-righteous, but empowered repentant sinners to be his disciples. And I guess as we think about that statement right there, we ought to think about what side of the coin we're on that. Are you someone who thinks you have it all together and wish everybody could be just like you? Maybe Jesus might be quick to rebuke you. Those who were like that in Jesus' day were called Pharisees and Sadducees. They used to argue about what was right about religion. And they would reject people like Peter, who was just common and ordinary, hardworking person, but when he found one that was like Peter, who was willing to say, Lord, I know I don't live up to what you are and what you need. If they were repentant, he would convert them into his disciples and he'd say, come follow me. I want to be the second kind of person. I don't want to be the person that has stones to throw at everybody around me about how they don't live up to what my standard of what I think is good. I want to be the one that loves people into the kingdom no matter what. I want to be the person who says that no matter where you are, no matter what you've done, the Father is saying, please come home. No matter how far you've gone, you've not gone far enough for God. And I'll stand up to defend that person every time against the person with a stone in their hand and say, let you without sin cast the first stone. Let's read on. So Peter just told Jesus that I'm not worthy to be around you. I'm just a sinner. Go away from me. And now we're going to read Jesus' reply. And Jesus replied to Simon,
Don't be afraid.
don't be afraid. Remember, how can you tell somebody how to feel? Why did Jesus say to Simon, don't be afraid? Because he's afraid. He's afraid he's going to be rejected. He's afraid he's going to be rejected by another religious person. He's afraid he's going to be cast out or trodden down by another religious person. Another religious person who thinks he doesn't live up to the measurement of what someone's supposed to be. And Simon's there and he's afraid. And that's why he's falling down at Jesus' feet and saying, I don't even want to try. I'm not even going to ask you to become your disciple because I'm afraid. But Jesus speaks right into what he's feeling. And he says, don't be afraid. Notice he didn't say don't feel afraid. Right? You see, there's a difference between feeling and being. He doesn't say don't feel afraid because, you know what? When I say that we can't control our feelings, a lot of times that's true. Though we may not be able to control our feelings, we don't have to let our feelings control us. Just because you feel afraid doesn't mean you have to be afraid. Just because you feel afraid doesn't mean that you have to be afraid. It doesn't mean that you can't take the risk, that you can't go the extra mile, that you can't do whatever it is that God's calling you to do to step out in faith. Let's read on in the second half of this verse. From now on, you'll be fishing for people. So here's Peter. He drops his nets, he follows Jesus, and he thinks he's on the path to Easy Street. The longer he's with Jesus, the more miracles he sees. He's with Jesus. What could ever go wrong? What can go wrong when you're with the guy who breaks up a kid's lunch and feeds 5,000 people? What can go wrong when you're with the guy who can heal the lepers and tell the lame to walk and tell the blind to see? What could possibly go wrong, right? He's with Jesus. He's got Jesus in his boat. What could possibly go wrong? Right? Let's read that again. We're back to the 8th chapter of the Gospel of Luke. And as they sailed across, Jesus settled down for a nap, but soon a fierce storm came down on the lake, and the boat was filling with water, and they were in real danger. So here he is. What could possibly go wrong? Now, do you remember whose boat are they in? They're in Peter's boat. They're in Peter's boat. And what does this boat represent to Peter? It represents everything that he could go back to. You know what? If Jesus kicks Peter out of the club, and he decides, Peter, you're too mouthy, you're too bold, I don't want you around me anymore, get out of here, Peter. What can Peter do? He can take his boat and go home. I'm going to take my balls and go home. I'm going to leave. I don't have to stay here. It represents his financial security. It represents him being able to take care of his family. Remember, it represented probably his whole life savings that went into buying this boat. When that boat turns over, every opportunity for Peter to go back would be destroyed. What is he feeling at that point? Let's read. And the disciples went and woke him up shouting, Master, Master, we're going to drown. And some of if you read this in the Gospel of Matthew that tells the same story, it says, don't you care that we're going to drown? Jesus, don't you care that we're going to drown? Does it even matter to you that we're going through this? Does it even matter to you that I've got that paper? Does it even matter to you? Does it even matter to you? Don't you care, Jesus? See, I asked that question, is Jesus in your boat? Is Jesus in your boat? And sometimes we think that because we've invited Jesus into our lives, it means that everything's going to be smooth sailing, that he's going to take care of everything, that we'll never have a worry, that we'll never have a care, that we'll never have a fear. Let's read on. We're going to start with when Jesus. When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and suddenly the storm stopped, and all was calm. And sometimes he does that in our lives. I've seen God show up. Man, have I seen God show up. I've seen God show up with thousands of dollars with a check in the mail that I wasn't expecting at a time when I had a bill that I couldn't pay. I've seen God show up with healing in the lives of doctors who said, in the face of doctors who said, this is incurable. I've seen God show up in my personal pain and help me make it through the day. I've seen God show up in my heartache, and maybe he didn't fix what happened, but he sure helped a lot with what was broken inside. And then he asked them, where's your faith? Where's your faith? Gospel of Matthew says, what is wrong with you? Don't you have any faith? Don't you have any faith? I'm in your boat. Yeah, you're in the middle of the sea and it's raging. You're in the middle of this world that I put you in, and the storm may be raging, but I'm in your boat. I'm going to work everything out. Where's your faith? The question isn't, am I going to make it through this storm? The question we should be asking is, Jesus in my boat? Because I know that I might not be able to weather this storm, but I don't have to because I've got Jesus in my boat. And he'll either calm the storm or he'll make me be able to make it through. But somehow, some way, if I've got Christ and I leave Christ at the head of my life and I'm following where he called me to go and doing what he said he would do, just like the hymn that we just sang, where what he says we will do, where he sends we will go, never fear, only trust and obey. You see, trust and obey is easy when it's in a song, but it's hard when it's in real life. When we have to trust and obey because we're really worried and we're fearful. And the Bible, I love this verse. Let's read it. The next verse, Luke 8:25, it says, the disciples were terrified and amazed. Stop there. Terrified and amazed. I love that it puts it in that order. Because we can tell when we're following after God. We can tell when we're taking steps of faith, when we're walking out on a step that isn't there, believing that God's going to make it appear after we step. Because we feel real fear. And if you never feel real fear, you will never transition to the and amazed. Let's read the whole thing. The disciples were terrified and amazed. Who is this man, they asked each other. When he gives a command, even the wind and the waves obey him. So here is my challenge to all of us today. Let's read this out loud. Never let the fear of what might happen to you keep you from experiencing what God wants to do through you. Let's read that again. Never let the fear of what might happen to you keep you from experiencing what God wants to do through you. Is Jesus in your boat? So, in this struggle against fear, I'm about to give you a tool that I learned in the book Crash the Chatterbox. And in this tool, you see what this does is it deals with the reality of the feelings of our fear, because we all, at some point or another, we're afraid, right? Yeah, if it's not for us, it's for a family member who's going through something. Yeah, we're all afraid at some point or another. We all feel this fear. And we can't change the reality of our feelings. But rather than to become paralyzed by our fears, this is a tool that will help us to press through and follow God in spite of our fears. So, these are some blanks that are in your notes that I don't have a word to fill in for you. You're going to have to fill in that word for yourself. It says, what if? Now here's the reason that I can't fill that blank out for you. Unlike Jesus, I can't look into your heart and know what it is that you're really afraid of. But whatever it is that you're really afraid of, maybe you're afraid of the phone call, maybe you're afraid of a piece of paper, maybe whatever it is that you're afraid of, I want you to put in that blank. What if I lose everything? What if I wake up tomorrow and it's all gone? What if the economy crashes? What if my car crashes? What if whatever it is that you are afraid of, I want you to put in that what if. See, because what if is the power of fear. What if is the power of fear. We ask ourselves that question, what if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? And that's where fear gets its power from. And the next blank, you're going to need to do some soul searching. And answer that question, what if? So what if I lost everything? That would be terrible. That would be terrible. You know what? If I lost everything that I have, if tomorrow I woke up and I had to file for bankruptcy because all my finances were gone, if tomorrow the economy crashed and I had no 401k again, anybody remember those days? Yeah. That would be terrible. And then here's the power. You see, what you did is you took the fear and you dived down in it. You dived down in it. God says He will. And you answer your greatest fears by diving down and claiming the promise of the Lord. So let's see how this works. What if I lost everything? That would be terrible. But God says He will restore to the righteous, whatever it is the enemy has stolen. But God says He will supply all my needs according to His riches and glory. But God says He will. So whatever it is that you're fearing, whatever it is that has you paralyzed with fear, what if the doctor has a bad diagnosis? That would be terrible. But God says He will heal me. Where are you going? So no matter where you're at, you can dive down in, dive down in, dive down into the promises of God. And I know some of you have faced horrendous things. Any of you have lost a child? I have multiple children that I never got to see because we lost them before they were born. And what if that happens? And it did. And that was terrible. But I'm telling you that I'm going to one day pass from this life to the next life. And the first face that I will see, the first arms that I will be able to hold, other than Jesus, will be the arms of the children that I didn't get to meet in this life because they were gone before they were born. Some of you have the pain of knowing what it's like to lose a child that you did hold in your arms. Some of you know that. And that was terrible. But aren't we glad that there's a promise of God that says that this life is not the only life? That there's another life beyond this life if Jesus is in your boat. That's the promise of the gospel. That resurrection happens in this life over and over and over again. And there was one thing that I didn't get to draw here. I was going to draw the future. And when I was going to draw the future, this is what I was going to draw. Anybody know what that is?
Headstone.
It's a headstone. That's every one of us have to face that future. It's just the truth. We're not going to get beyond it unless Christ comes back within our lifetime. And He promised, I will behold, I come soon. If I knew the answer to soon, maybe I wouldn't have to confront this reality. But I have to confront this reality because we all have to confront this reality. And the question that you need to ask before you're confronting that reality is Jesus in your boat? And in my time of prayer this week, I knew I was going to speak a message, is Jesus in your boat? And as I was praying, the Lord, He said something to me that kind of flipped the coin on me. And it was maybe, just maybe, John, maybe you need to ask a different question. Remember how when people used to come at Jesus with a question that He didn't want to answer, He would answer it with a different question that kind of confused everybody? What if the question that we should be asking is, are you Jesus' boat? Are you Jesus' boat? The Bible often refers to our lives, our person, as a vessel. You know, in 1 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul writes, and he says, and some vessels are created for honor, and some vessels are created for dishonor, but take care for how you yield your vessel. Anybody else have an idea what that word vessel also refers to? Anybody who knows anything about ships or has been around water, they are often referred to as vessels. And my question is, are you Jesus' boat? Are you the person who has decided that, just like Simon Peter, have you decided and said, Jesus, you can use my boat. Jesus, you can use this life. Jesus, you can take my life and do whatever it is that you want to do with my life. Are you Jesus' boat? Because Jesus is looking for those kind of disciples. As I was reading further in the Gospel of Luke this week, I ran across this verse as I was looking through that, and it just blew my mind back. Are you Jesus' boat? And I thought maybe that wasn't really Jesus I was hearing from when I was hearing him change this question. But then you ever have reading the Bible and there's a verse that just leaps off the page? And I'm reading in the Gospel of Luke and I come across this verse in Luke 14:33. Let's read it out loud. It says, so you cannot become my disciples without giving up everything you own. You cannot become my disciple without giving up everything you own. And And this is why when Jesus would rebuke the self-righteous, because they wouldn't give up everything they owned. You see, they had a reputation to uphold. They had their own way of doing things. They had their own plans. They had their own way to get to God. They weren't going to accept Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life. They were going to do what was right in their own eyes. But someone who was willing to give up everything, like Peter, and say, my boat's your boat. My life savings is your life savings. Whatever I have, the old hymn used to say, take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to thee. Are you Jesus' boat? I'm going to close in prayer. And for our prayer time this week, we're going to do something a little bit different. I want you to think about your prayer requests. I want you to think about what God would have you do. I want you to think about your life. I want you to think about what it is Jesus is calling you to. And you've got a little card inside of your bulletin, and it looks like this. And it just simply says prayer on there. I invite you to write your prayers on this. Places where you need to see Jesus in your boat. Places you need to see Jesus in your friend's boat. Maybe it is your friends who are struggling with cancer. Maybe it is your friends who are struggling with different health issues. Maybe it is your friends who are struggling with financial issues. Maybe it is your friends who are struggling with relationship issues. Whatever issues it is that they're struggling with. And invite that into Jesus' boat. So what I want you to do is I want you to write them down. And I'm going to meet with my prayer team this week. And we're going to pray through these one by one. Don, the chairman of the diaconate, will transpose these and get them out to everyone who's on the prayer chain. If you want to be on the prayer chain and you're not, I invite you to email me and I'll get it to Don and he'll add you to that. My email is pastor@theflorencechurch.com. The prayer chain is a list that goes out of things that people are praying for, and everyone that gets that commits to praying for those things for people during the week. Thanks for asking. So I invite you to do that. And what you're going to do is when you're done filling that out, I'm going to sing a song. And I invite you to just come up at your leisure and put the prayers in the boat. If it happens to be something that you don't really want to talk about, and you don't really want everybody to know about, just check that. I'll go through these first and I'll pray through those personally. And I won't pass them around so that if there's anything private, you're welcome to do that. Heavenly Father, we come before you in the name of Jesus. Come before you with a time of prayer. Lord, I know all around this room and even outside this room, connected in relationships, God, we just need to see you show up. There are people around who are afraid because they think you're sleeping at the boat, Jesus, but I know that you're not afraid. I know that anything that you allow to happen to us is just to get us to a place where you're trying to do something through us, God. Help us to not lose heart. Help us to not lose faith. Help us that even when we feel afraid, help us to not be afraid. Help us to, when we feel like turning back, to not be one who turns back. Give us faith to follow. Give us strength to hold on. fill us with your life. Jesus, we offer our lives as a vessel to you. Take our lives and let it be consecrated to you. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.